Hi guys, and welcome to this beginner's acoustic course where we're going to be looking at chords and rhythm playing. Now, chord and rhythm playing goes very much hand in hand because anytime you're listening to, records where you're listening to an acoustic guitarist, quite often they're strumming and playing the chords, and the combination of the two pretty much creates the song. So what we're going to be doing is really working very hard to make sure that not only your right hand, so your rhythm hand is learning strumming patterns and you're in time and everything sounds very tuneful, but also your left hand is playing the correct chords and going into the right place. So we've got work to do with both hands, and throughout the course we're going to be working an equal amount of time on each. Okay, now today what we're going to be doing is looking through, first of all, just a recap of the string names. Then we're going to be going through your first two chords and how to read chord boxes and chord diagrams. Okay, and this will set you up for every other chord lesson that we're going to be doing. So let's get straight down to it and get started by just recapping the names of the strings. Okay, so if you don't know this, then pay attention because this is really important. The strings are 6 strings and they're E, A, D, G, B, E, okay, in that order. Now, the way I like to remember it, and the way all my students remember it, because this is how I showed them to, is elephants and donkeys grow big ears. There's the rhyme that you need to make sure that it's kind of sticking in your brain. So elephants and donkeys grow big ears. And that's one that I think certainly sticks in my brain. If you want to come up with another rhyme, then it's totally up to you. But however you do it, we need to remember E, A, D, G, B, E. Okay, and one of the really crucial factors as to why we need that is because a lot of the time when I'm fretting chords and showing you these examples, I'm going to be saying you need to be with this finger on the G string or the D string or whichever one, and so therefore you need to know what these strings are. So that's your first little task. Just refresh that if you haven't learned it already, learn it now. Now next up we're going to be looking at chords, and the two chords that I want to play through in this lesson are E minor and A sus2. Okay, so E minor and A sus2. If I start playing them together, they sound like this. Okay, so these are really nice, big sounding chord shapes, okay? And they're great starter chords because they're relatively simple. We're just using 2 fingers. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the E minor chord. Okay, so it looks like this. Now, because it's the first chord in theory you've ever done, there's a few bits that we're going to have to go over to make sure that you're fretting chords properly. So first of all, let's just get the fingers on the right notes. So basically what I'm using is my second finger, okay, and I'm using it on the A string, so elephants and this string here, and I'm using it on the 2nd fret. So in terms of frets, these are your frets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Every single bit separated by the silver bars are your frets, okay? So I'm on the 2nd fret, which is here, of the A string with my 2nd finger, okay? Just need to pluck that to make sure that it's a nice clear sounding note. We'll talk through how to make sure the notes are perfect in a second. And then the next note is your 3rd finger, which is right underneath on the D string, so elephants and donkeys. Yep, that's it. On the 2nd fret as well. So basically your chord looks like that. You've got those 2 notes and you need to make sure that with the right hand, so with your plectrum, they're plucked through like that, okay? And overall it should sound like this. Because every other string should be open. So i.e. you're not touching them with your fingers and therefore it all sounds nice and clear. Now, let's get on to the pointers, how to make sure that this chord sounds really good, and pretty common mistakes that people will be making. So the first thing is that we need to make sure that your wrist is nice and around the neck, okay? And that's going to really help with the fact that you need to be creating bridges underneath your fingers here, because essentially what's going to be happening is quite often you're going to be accidentally muting strings underneath the notes that you're fretting. So quite often here at this point, this 3rd finger will be just slightly touching the G string, and therefore you won't be able to hear it properly. And if you can't hear that properly, then it's not really the full chord, okay? So the way to avoid that is by taking your thumb, okay, and just putting it right at the back of the neck, okay? So you can see it's nice and flat. So it's not like that, okay? It's nice and flat on the back of the neck, And then if I just spin that round, as I then put my thumb at the back, you can see my whole wrist has come around the guitar, okay? The higher my thumb is, see my thumb just poking over the top there, the more the wrist is not going to be as far around, and the harder it becomes to create the bridge. So I just bring that thumb further back, and I can go all the way down, and the further down I go, the more this wrist comes around, and the easier it is to create these bridges, okay? So as well as the wrist being around like that, I've also made sure that these two joints are bent, okay? So at first, quite a lot of people struggle to bend those two joints, and therefore you're going to get a chord that, even though you can hear these two, you're not going to get the strings underneath because you're going to be accidentally hitting them. So we need to make sure those are bent as well. So with the fingers, that's the main thing you need to be remembering. Thumb at the back, and then creating the wrist coming round, and then a nice bend here, and there we have the bridge that we need to make sure the strings are ringing out. So have a little play around with that. It will feel really awkward at first, I will say, because it is pretty awkward, but just a few weeks of practice on that and you'll really kind of get it all together. It won't feel awkward anymore. So the only other thing is that the further these fingers are across to the silver fret, so this silver bit here, the clearer the notes are going to be. So you can see how my third finger is right up against it, and my second finger is as close as I can get it without pushing this one away. And that means that these two notes are going to be nice and clear. If I come too far back in the fret, it's really hard. Even though I'm pushing down really hard, it's harder to get them sounding clear. So far across like that, we'll have a nice clear chord. So at this point then, with that all in position, we now need to make sure that it's all sounding clear. So you're just going to pick through each individual string. And again. So that's what it should sound like, okay? So there we go, guys. That's your first chord, and this chord is called an E minor, okay? Now, once you've had a bit of practice with that, just take the fingers off and just relax for a second, because I know how strenuous that is going to be feeling at this point. You'll be getting really big dents in the tips of your fingers if you're doing it correctly and pushing down nice and hard. And just notice where those dents are. That's where you need to be pushing in. So right at the very tip of your fingers. Hopefully you can see that. Now, the second chord we're going to learn is A sus2. Now don't worry about the name so much of this one, but all we got to do is actually take this first chord that we've learned and move it down one string each, okay? So now my second finger's on the D string, second fret, okay, elephants and donkeys, and my third finger's on the G string, elephants and donkeys grow, big ears, on the second fret. Okay, so it's exactly the same, I've just dropped it down. And the same rules apply. My thumb's at the back of the neck, I'm creating this lovely bridge with my fingers. Now the only difference is that I'm not going to play deliberately the open E string, so the low string. I'm going to start from the A. And it should sound like that. So when I pluck through this, that's what it sounds like, okay? So, your first main task today, guys, is to get together the E minor and the A sus2. And I want to see you just practicing them both. So just casually, just in your own time, just change between the two, trying to fret them in the correct places, get a nice clear sound. Don't worry, it's not going to be perfect at the moment, but at least you know what you're aiming for. It should sound like this, but it's going to feel very strenuous on the wrist and on the fingers, and you're only going to be able to do it for 10 minutes really before it starts to become a bit too much. So little breaks and then come back to it and just keep going over and over it until you're starting to get it. Okay? Persistence is everything in the early days of learning the guitar. You just got to keep at it and it will get easier. So they're the first two that you're going to learn. Now, alongside this, you're going to see material that's going to help remind you how to use the chords, okay? And these are called chord diagrams or fretboard diagrams, okay? And as well as the ones you see on our website, you're also going to find them all over the internet. So I just want to explain to you how they work. Now, the fretboard diagrams are pretty self-explanatory. It's literally a map of the fretboard. So you see the frets and you see the strings, and then the blobs just tell you where to put your fingers. Okay, so it's as simple as that, really. So when you're looking at an A sus2, for example, it will look like this on the fretboard diagram. And the only thing you really need to remember is that it's upside down, okay? It's like a reflection image, okay? So the A sus2 would look like that, and you can see those two blobs show you the exact same thing that I'm looking at here. And if I did the E minor, it would look like that, okay? So that's really how the fretboard diagrams work. Okay. Now the chord diagrams are a little different because the chord diagrams look something like this. So if we were looking at E minor, it looks like this, and you can see that basically the vertical lines are actually the strings and the horizontal lines are your frets. Okay, so a little bit different. It's kind of flipped it up a little bit, kind of put it on a 90-degree angle. Okay, so in order, the strings are E, A, D, G, B, E. Okay, so you can see how they're the vertical lines. And then the frets are those horizontal lines. Now, where those blobs are, that again is telling you where to put your fingers. Okay, so for the E minor, it's very clearly saying that you need to put your finger on the second fret of the A string and the other finger on the second fret of the D string. Okay. Now, also with chord diagrams, you'll see numbers in the blobs, which tell you which fingers to use, which is really cool, really important. And that is the second finger and third finger, okay? So hopefully that all makes sense. Make sure that it does, because obviously you're going to be using these kind of diagrams a lot from here on in. There's the supporting material. And if that is all good and all understood, then it's time for you to go away, practice those two chords, and what we're going to be looking at next time is taking those two chords and speeding up the changes.